I think
your
very
brother
reverential of you, Rachel.
I know.
Refer to your brother as
You're in a weird
The reason I
position,
say the Prime Minister is because I don't call him Boris, you see, so it's much easier to say the
What do you
Prime
call
Minister.
him?
I call him Al.
Oh, fuck you, Al!
Together, with the lights out, Dennis and Vi stood and looked up at the neighbouring window. They felt the play of his binoculars over their possessions, their lives. The fitted green carpet in the living room, the coal effect fire, the Daily Mail reader off a carriage clock, the Royal Dalton Ware figurine of the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother! They felt his mocking beams assess their choice of television programme, and the sad secret reasons for adopting this coffee-coloured son. They seethed with the first stirrings of feud. When someone trampled the ornamental poppy in the front garden, they had an inkling that it might be him. When Dennis could have sworn that the slug pellets had been moved from one end of the shed to the other, he had a sudden notion. When Royal Dalton Ware sent them a frankly obscene figurine instead of the requested statuette of Lady Di. What was she in the fucking Paris tunnel? Oh my god! Dennis! They both found it hard to fight the suspicion, and when the cat went missing, they had no doubt. He's killed the cat.
He's turned the cat into cheese.
He's cheesed the cat. I tell you what, honey bunch, said Dennis to Vi. I've got just the thing for him. He's gonna poison him. His answer, of course, was the Cupressor Leylandii, the nuclear weapon of suburban hate. When Dennis planted them 10 in a row at the bottom of the garden, they were only 8 feet tall. In 2 years they had almost doubled, upwards, sideways, diagonally groping their spongy, aromatic fronds. He has to make everything sexual, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Twilight descended on the sunny little room where Price would take his breakfast. He takes his breakfast.
Freddie, I believe I'll take breakfast in the pen.
I believe I'll take breakfast at the brothel today. Soon, the topmost sprigs were beginning to challenge the upper floor. Soon, thought Price, he would need to keep the lights on all day, throughout the house. He began with letters. He invoked the council.
He invoked the council.
Just invocations to the sky.
Atia of the Julia.
He sent them the text of the High Hedges Bill, then making its progress through the Commons. But Dennis knew, instinctively, that his hedge was untouchable. An Englishman's home is his castle.
Fuck off.
And Parliament would surely find it impossible to give one man the right to compel the chopping down of another man's trees. Price joined a Leylandii victims support group.
Why is this even in here? What the fuck?
Yeah, it was no use. Sometimes, with much pleading, the council's hedge officer would persuade Dennis to make a few desultory abbreviations to the very top. This book is so refreshingly unpompous. But if Price pushed or moaned too much, Dennis would threaten to expose him as a peeping Tom and cheese freak.
Peeping Tom and cheese freak. This is supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
This whole section is...
This is hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm laughing very much right now. As you can probably tell, Joe, I'm laughing immensely right now.
I can tell that, yeah.
This is my laughter face. I'll get the health and safety round to that garage, he said. We all know what goes on there. It's disgusting. It's disgusting, said Dean's adoptive father. And then one September, 2.5 years after the deployment of the Leylandii, Price exacted his appalling revenge. Dennis and Vi and Dean had been to Alicante, and things had not been easy. Dennis resented the way Dean kept his headphones on all day, and Dean was basically doing his nut.
Dennis resented the way Dean kept looking at his wife.
Yeah, Dennis resented the way he kept doing his nut on his wife. That's all Vi needs.
Through the window while she's in the bar.
Yeah. 33 feet over the Leylandii. For 7 solid days, he had endured a beach holiday with his adoptive parents. Dennis with the factor 15 glooped on top of his head and every other extremity. Vi with her crispy hair and stunned blue eyes and pointless expensive jewellery. Dennis with his old man's tits. Okay. Why does he have his dad's tits? Vi with her evening lipstick running into the cracks around her mouth. Dean would stare at the incredible girls and feel a repeated sense of amazement that
Here we fucking go.
Yeah, and feel a repeated sense of amazement that people were allowed to appear like this before him in public. He would lie on his back and squint at the surf and observe the curious fact that when a beautiful girl emerged from the sea, you couldn't always tell how big she was. As she rose with water running down her terrifying shape, he would assume she was a divinity, a Venus Anadyomene, a mega-titted 6-footer. But then she came closer, so close that sometimes she would drip all over him. He would see that she was really just a little Spanish girl, all in the same proportions, but with her dimensions magnified by the sun. Bit worrying. Got to be honest with the company that Boris keeps.
Yeah. Now, Dean never met Jeffrey Epstein. He was in Pizza Express.
Just sweating one out in Pizza Express. Dean, Vi had called to him at one stage. Shouldn't you be going for a swim? And he had leaned forward, flapping his hands in irritation. He had sulked, in fact, all holiday, and his sulk was the worse because he was ashamed of his sulking. And he was ashamed because he knew, with the good part of himself, that Dennis and Vi were only doing their best. It's fucking thrilling stuff, this.
I know.
And also, very funny.
Yeah, this is a comedy political thriller about Dean and his trip to the beach where he fucking ogled children.
That Dean and his dick. For fuck's sake, Boris. Alex. Fuck's sake,
you,
Alex. So when he saw what had happened to the Hedge, he felt an almost superhuman surge of loyal rage. The desecration was bad enough on its own. The tremendous battlefield aura of aggression and violation that rose from the buzzsawed stumps. It was insane in itself that Price should have felt able to cross the frontier in broad daylight and perpetrate this massacre. Where was all this fucking big bold Billy Big Balls language when we were talking about Iraq, Boris?
Fuck you, Al.
But the real offence was the insult that made Vi cry and made Dennis sink to his knees in lamentation. To crush your enemies, feel driven before you, to hear the lamentation of their women. My trees, he cried, and his voice rose over Wednesbury like Rachel weeping for her children. At the end of the lawn, next to a mound of hacked-off foliage, were the limbs and trunks of the victims, neatly hewn by this psychopath into even lengths. Propped up in felt tip was an amateur advertisement. Logs for sale. Haven't you heard? Said Price the Cheese. Law's been changed, hasn't it? The council sends you 3 warnings, and then they're entitled to chop down a vexatious tree. What is this law? Wailed Vi. What is this law?
You betray the law! Law!
Whose side am I supposed to be on in this
The
dispute?
Jones, the terrorist, who's going to put an end to this fucking madness. For many human beings, there is something psychologically disabling about an act of violence on this scale. Some will lash out and let the instant flame of vengeance bloom in their hearts. Others find themselves winded, depressed, and full of the loneliness of the victim. So Dennis and Vi made themselves a Baxter's mushroom-rich cuppa soup and retreated to their bedroom to fuck for hours. This utter fucking bizarro world. As he lay in his own narrow cell, adorned with the Lord of the Rings posters and a Sunday Times map of the Roman Empire, Dean listened to their defeated fucking. He listened to their defeated murmurs and fed his fury. It's a euphemism for something. He knew in his heart that Price had a point. They all knew it secretly, even Vi. But the coffee-coloured, semi-detached adolescent saw in the disaster a chance for oneness with his parents. You've got to stop that, Boris. You can't just keep calling him that. What was that about his delusions of otherness? Yeah. Anyway, like I was saying, this coffee-coloured boy, he would fight their corner. He would make a great act of atonement for the fact of his difference. Expertly skipping the stair that creaked, he went downstairs, equipped himself, and stole like the shadow of a panther into the garden of Price the Cheese. I just want to say this is the longest chapter in this book so far.
And it's complete
devoted
bollocks
to fucking nonsense. The first warning Price had was the bang of the frosted glass on his front door, blown in by the heat from the banked bonfire of logs and kerosene-drenched brushwood. Immediately his house began to surrender itself to the flames. The junk mail writhed and was consumed on the mat. The mat offered no resistance. All along the corridor it was a tale of instant, ecstatic capitulation by the pictures and soft furnishings. He's gonna kill him!
He's actually gonna kill him, yeah. I mean, fucking...
I hope so, to be honest.
Anything-
Of these All Price's possessions were ready to turn themselves in, and might have betrayed their master to perdition had he not heard the boom, nipped out from under his duvet in his Viella pyjamas, opened the landing window, and leapt for the now non-existent branches. Oh, see? He paid the price in the end. So Price the Cheese fell with an oath because he had no doubt.
This is fucking Treasure Island now.
Dean knew what to do. He took a snap decision. He would say nothing. As a strategy, it failed. The police came looking and found a jerry can covered with Dean's fingerprints in the Faulkner shed. Well, he just took it back. Like, just throw it in, dude. Fuck me. Have you never burnt a house down before? Fucking Tories, eh? Dean was taken to the living room, and under the gaze of the Queen Mother, his adoptive parents, and 2 kindly members of the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad, he burst into tears. His mother said nothing, but it was the words of his father that he kept and nursed, coddling and crooning over them when he wanted to bruise his heart into hatred. Poor Dennis had tried so hard, for Vi's sake, to love the kid, but he had never utterly succeeded.
Oh.
That's nice to know.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, for God's sake, he said now, swatting the side of his head as though a mosquito had landed on either ear. Oh my fucking good God.
Oh no, he's gonna call him something nasty.
Yes, he is. Again, I apologise for this. I will censor it. You stupid little... This is just a drink to forget at this point. As soon as the word was out, he wanted to choke it back. Vi was furious. Dennis had never said anything like it before, and it was a complete rejection of everything she stood for. What with her work in the Sue Ryder shop and all.
Does it actually say that? Yeah. Oh my God! Let's get this right. Protesters on the streets. Yeah, they're a bunch of complete fucking idiots who don't have a clue about the world, but a little old lady who works in a Sue Ryder shop
She's a staunch advocate for racial equality.
Because she works in the Sue Ryder shop.
See, Joe, a little factoid here for you that not a lot of people know. Dr. Martin Luther King actually
worked in a Sue Ryder shop.
Dennis, she snapped. Oh, I'm sorry, my dear, said the former Lyft executive, advancing on Dean. Listen to this. One of the policemen scribbled in his notebook. I don't know why that's just happened. Oh, wow. I hope you like the sound of censorship bleeps, because you're about to hear a lot of them.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
One of the policemen scribbled in his notebook. You never knew how these things would go, but Dean shrank before him, and the ambiguities in his status seemed to fade away. There it was, en clair, decoded. He was a and he was stupid. And he was stupid because he was a and whenever he was subsequently affected by doubt or scruple about what he was doing, he would say stupid to himself. And immediately the watertight bulkheads in his brain would come crashing down, which was what Dean did now as he sat in the stifling heat in the back of the ambulance.
Oh, thank fuck.
Assisting...
I never thought I'd say this, but thank fuck we're back to the actual story of this book.
Listen to this line is so perfect for this moment. Assisting in a plot that had started to go wrong almost as soon as it began. Yep, you're damn right there, Boris.
I'm having a drink for getting back to the story.
Yeah, we're finally back. Stupid little he said to himself, as though reciting a passage from the Holy Koran, and shut the gates of mercy on mankind. The train of death is on its way, said Jones. Its riders are steadfast. Oh my god. I swear, every line you just want to go, oh my god. Yeah, all right then, said Dean.
Oh. Do you reckon as he's going to detonate his suicide message, we'll go, turn off the beat.
Jones pulled up outside the Red Lion pub. The Muslim wrinkled his nose at the smell of beer.
For fuck's sake.
He's Welsh. Let's get real then. A Welshman wrinkling his nose at beer. I mean, I find that very hard to believe. He could see the boom ahead and the car park beyond it, normally used by MPs, from which he proposed to set out on foot.
Chapter 18, 09:11 hours. Adam Swallow rose and walked towards the driver's window. Are you the guys I am expecting? Jones nodded. Adam looked into those eyes and felt a momentary lurch of uncertainty. He hoped to goodness that Benedict had got this thing right. Right, so yep, all of them are involved, we called that. So
Yep.
I believe for the first time we've actually made a prediction that was correct.
What do you mean by that? No, our predictions come true all the time. Well, let's put it a different way. My predictions come true all the time.
He wondered how the hell he was going to pass this gang off as a TV crew. He looked at Habib, Freddy, now playing again with his rosary, at Haroon with his expression of a camel about to spit.
What?
Adam tried to peer into the darkness. So which one of you is the victim? He is behind, said Jones, jerking his thumb. He is not very well. Please respect his condition. I didn't realise he would still need an ambulance. Certainly, we have many supporters in the healthcare services.
What? The NHS, is a jihadist
cell.
Is a jihadi cell.
Yeah. Okay, said Adam, prepared to hand over the car park pass, thinking as he did so that he would ring Benedict as soon as he could.
Benny. Oh, Dickie.
Do you mind telling me what kind of torture it was? Was it in Abu Ghraib, he said, naming the notorious jail in Baghdad. I know he just named the notorious jail in Baghdad.
He just did it.
The American women did it, said Haroon. They did it with the long sweeping brush handle and the dog. He mimed and Adam flinched. Without a word he handed over the plastic pass and Jones reignited the engine and drove towards the boom. Okay, oh god. The Yanks would be here any minute. What are you lot on about? Wailed Dean, and was hit by Haroon. Ha 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 ha. The cavalcade now found itself somewhat ahead of schedule as it pulled through Chelsea. Bloody Yanks, said one Chelsea pensioner.
The Chelsea pensioners are out.
All the gear and no idea. Most of his life, post-war, had been dominated by a single controversy. Who was the greater general, Monty or Eisenhower? And why did Monty dither at Ken? On this subject, he literally bored for Britain. He's going to save the day.
Yeah, probably.
POTUS in 3 minutes, crackled the news in the ears of Joe, Matt and all the other USSS men in Parliament Square.
I do just love the term USSS.
Yeah, USSS, yeah.
It's just so befitting.
What I love, right, is Joe and Matt, we haven't heard from them since, like, way back at the beginning of the book. And yet, when they come back, it's just Joe and Matt.
Yeah, everyone else has, like, full titles
Everyone else,
and full names,
full
brackets
name and,
with their nicknames in it.
Yeah.
We have flashbacks to their first day at primary school.
Yeah. So huge, in fact, was the US Secret Service men's requirement for bandwidth that yesterday, at Windsor, they had disabled Her Majesty's TV aerial and she had been unable to watch Channel 4 racing. I jez lurve to watch the horses, the President said.
It started fine, and then he just, as he went on, he just decided to start throwing in accents, like at complete random.
In the ops room at New Scotland Yard, the London police were still analysing the implications of the news from Horseferry Road. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Stephen Purnell, what's his middle name, Boris? Your dead traffic warden is meant to have recorded all the details in his husky, isn't he? Yes, sir. Well, what are you waiting for? We'll be able to find out all about it from the APCOA computer.
From the
Well, what are you? Well, fuck, where am I here? Righty-ho, sir. But hang on, sir. I'll have to tell Colonel Blewett we're raising the alert threshold. What if he wants to know why? Tell Blewett to call me, said the ranking British officer.
Tell Blewett to blow me.
Before they could dial him, Blewett was on the line.
This keeps happening.
Yep, it's handy that, isn't it? The ambulance lolloped down towards the police booth.
You think how much left of this fucking book there is? How many different ways do you think you're going to have of just making up fucking words to to say basic fucking
Yeah.
things.
The fatal machine had penetrated the walls of the precincts of the Palace of Westminster, pregnant with arms.
Can you imagine that? Being pregnant with just a bunch of arms.
Jones parked it smartly and out of the way in Bay 20 of the small tarmac yard. As he walked towards it, Adam suddenly felt a fierce flush of righteousness, and as he looked at the tinted side window, he speculated murderously about the condition of the poor man within. He and Cameron had been together in his Holborn flat when, trawling the anti-war websites, he had come across the archive of horror from Abu Ghraib. "Now I understand it," Cameron had said when they looked together at one of the unprintable images of a naked Iraqi corpse and a rather pretty Virginia girl brainlessly mugging for the camera. "Now I understand how you could become a suicide bomber." As he walked towards the van, he wondered how exactly they would bring the injured man in and what his injuries were. Would he need a wheelchair? Would they use a stretcher? He wouldn't stay to find out because his plan was to be there in the hall when they entered. He wanted to see the expression on the face of the president. No one of importance had resigned in the wake of the scandal. None of the crack-brained neocons had really been confronted with the full awfulness of their doctrines. Now was the time for a reckoning. Chapter 19. 09:14 hours. Now the noise was rising from the square to mark the imminent presidential arrival, and the crowd was flagellating itself with posters denouncing everything American from bombs to powdered baby milk, like distraught mullahs at an Ayatollah's funeral. "Ah, Felix," said Roger as they adopted attitudes as transparently insincere as Molotov hailing Ribbentrop.
Go to bed, Boris.
"My dear fellow," said Felix, shaking his grey locks. "And how is Felix this fine morning?" "Felix is a little short of superb," said Felix. Felix had turned to go, fishing for his press gallery pass. Roger Barlow felt temptation welling up. Oh God. He's gonna shag Felix.
Yeah.
"Hey Felix." "Yes, old man?" "I wonder whether I could beg a favour off you. It's... well, you know, in newspapers, in newspapers you chaps probably have a pretty good idea in the morning what you're going to put in the paper that day." "Well, I don't have the faintest idea." "Not you, I mean the chaps in general. The top chaps." "Is this going to take much longer, old boy? Because I've got an urgent appointment with a cup of coffee and a jammed donut." "To be perfectly honest, this is very embarrassing. I want to know if they are doing an article about me." "An article about you?" "Yes, and if they are, I promise I won't make a fuss or do anything about it." "And what kind of article might this be? Are you making a speech?" "Well, actually, I'm making a speech today. It's about water fluoridation, but I don't expect the article will be about that." "Right. It may well be about something else." "Right. What?" "Right you are, Gov. I'll keep my eyes peeled for an article about Roger Barlow, not mentioning water fluoridation." Felix went into the press gallery, whistling Papageno's song, and Roger felt the accustomed sweat of shame and idiocy on his brow.
Fucking hell, this is still going on.
Yeah. In plotting the route of the cavalcade, Colonel Blewett of the USSS had reasoned that the embankment, being built up on only one side, offered fewer opportunities to the sniper. Whoomph went the Chevrolet people carriers, stuffed with bulging security men.
Where were they bulging exactly?
Whoomph went the Cadillacs. The hugest Cadillacs anyone had ever seen. He's a child! With their high roofs, athletic flanks and shred-proof tyres, they were preposterously suggestive of a dominating class, the functioning, air-conditioned American version of a discredited Soviet idea.
What?
I'm sorry, what the fuck? So, the idea of a dominating class is a discredited Soviet idea, is it? That's why we have an aristocrat as our Prime Minister, with Jacob Rees-Cunt as his fucking second. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you
Class
fucking
has been
Class has been... the idea of class has been discredited, says an aristocrat.
because of an American president driving in a big car. I don't understand what the fuck he's talking about.
Whoomph went the first decoy presidential car. Can you guess what the next word is? Place your bets now, folks.
Is it whoomp?
It's whoomph. Whoomph went the second decoy presidential car. Whoomph, whoomph, whoomph. And that's the end of the sentence.
God, he loves making noises. Can you imagine him sat in the bath? Wiping off with this little toy car. This one can fly now as well. No one's ever seen a car that's as good as this one.
Just so must the tribes of Britannia have stood by the same gleaming brown river in AD 43, not knowing whether to cheer or boo, as the muddy legions of Claudius marched into Londinium, fresh from settling the Atrebates or the Belgae. Just so had the Saxons crowded round when the Norman conqueror was crowned on Christmas Day 1066, setting up such an ambiguous roar that the knights thought it was a revolt and cut them down. Boris...
Go to bed. What have I fucking told you?
Fuck's sake, Boris. You're a fucking dickhead. Except that Britain wasn't a colony of America, was she? She could hardly be called a vassal state, could she? No, she was an ally, a close and trusted ally, though she stood in relation to America as the most loyal member of the Delian League had stood to Athens.
Right, Boris, you're very tired. You need to go to bed.
Fact is, America has got bases, military bases, in places like Uzbekistan, said a scruffy history professor to his wife as they walked up behind the railings. I mean, 20 years ago those places had missiles pointing at us. Unbelievable, said his wife. Of course, most people in this country don't give a stuff about American dominance, do they? And this demonstration is really pretty small beer compared to the anti-Vietnam demos in the 60s. Didn't we used to go on pro-Vietnam demos? Asked his wife. We did, darling, but times have changed. The professor and his wife sat on their shooting sticks and took out their placards.
Where did they take these placards from?
Oh, for God's sake. In quavering magic marker, the medievalist, which I assume is Boris Johnson, had written, "Hop it, Yanks." I don't mean you, of course, the professor smiled at a group from the Rutgers University debating team who were out with plastic stars and stripes to support the president and having a tough time of it. That's all right, sir, said the well-bred students. Well-bred, eh, Boris?
What were their skull measurements? Why didn't you give us some of those?
Yay, they shouted now as the cavalcade shot past them like a black river of steel, and their cries were drowned out by the British mob. The British mob.
Bob Hoskins.
The noise of her president's arrival made the hairs prickle on Cameron's bare arms as she...
So I was going to say bare ass.
And she clacked ever faster in her strappy shoes down the stone tunnel that led to Portcullis House. She felt a pang. It was guilt. But, if you considered the enormity of what she was about to do, it was only the tiniest frisson of guilt. In her current mood, she could feel herself squashing her guilt like an aphid on a rose. When she had become a researcher at the House of Commons, she had signed a formal promise, dedicated to the Sergeant-at-Arms, that she would never do precisely what she was about to do.
It's like the Mafia when they join. They bleed on the picture of the Virgin Mary and the rosary. I will never inform on the Westminster paedophile ring.
Honestly, mate, when they are, made in Westminster, I fucking shudder to think what the fuck they have to do for ritual.
Yeah, well, they fuck pig heads when they're at fucking school, so fuck knows what they do when they've become a man.
Ah, so what, she thought. Think of the men in your life, darling. Think of your loyalties. There was Barlow. Yuck. What was it about these English guys? What did he think he was doing? Grabbing her lower jaw and fiddling with her teeth? I mean, that is a fucking good point. To be fair. Fucking good point. Mate. And yet, apart from Barlow's absent-minded attentions, her 8 months in England had been an unremitting tale of tepidity, frustration, and, let's be brutal, flaccidity. She had been taken on dates, only to find that the man's idea of a romantic climax to the evening was to escort her to a bar and meet a couple of his mates from school. School. You said it, Boris, not me, mate.
Well, to be fair, the schools he went to weren't much of ones, were they?
Yeah, where school meant Charterhouse or Bradfield or some other fee-paying haven of punish practices.
Yeah.
She had fought down her incredulity when a series of good-looking and allegedly heterosexual men had taken her to the zoo, to a game of cricket or to an Inuit art house movie, and to an ice skating rink. And on one occasion it had been seriously suggested to her that she pay. She had stood almost in tears amid pastry cutters and casseroles, as supposedly red-blooded Englishmen had baked before her eyes some kind of upside-down cake with pineapple and glace cherries.
What the fuck is going on?
At the crucial moment when one man had slipped from the room and returned with a porn video which he had laid before her with all the moronic enthusiasm of a cocker spaniel that had brought in something disgusting from a ditch. And always at the end of the evening there were these delicate manoeuvres that cast her as the naysayer when she was not at all sure that she wanted to say nay. Was there no one in this goddamn country who wanted to take her firmly in his arms and give a girl the time of day? Sometimes as she lay awake on her own in her little flat in Claverton Street, Pimlico, she would Sorry, I'm just...
No, please stop. Please do stop. What in the name of fucking Christ is going on here?
She would wonder whether it was to do with their mothers, or public schools, or nannies, or hot water bottles. Yes, it is, yes. Again, because all she's describing it is, these English. These aren't the English. These are the toffs. These are the aristocracy. These are Frenchmen.
What the fuck is happening here? So this is Boris Johnson's appeal to what he sees as his manly qualities, using this fictional woman as a mouthpiece to act like all the men around me are all these foppish dandy types.
I'm a rapist, however.
Yeah, because I'll just grab a hold of you.
Sometimes, at her most vulnerable, she would open her mind to the brackets sob, close brackets, possibility that it was something to do with her. Which was absurd, because ever since she was a tiny little girl, she had been told how beautiful she was. Sometimes she began to worry that she was going to lose it altogether. Not her virginity, obviously, but her initiate status. Perhaps her hymen would actually regrow.
Fucking hell, Boris. This is getting worse.
Yeah, this is sick.
I'm fucking just stunned at this.
At one point, she seriously considered the rights and wrongs of an affair with Roger. Of course she did.
Of course.
Once you got over the nicotine-stained teeth and the goofy sense of humour, there was something vaguely compelling about him.
Yeah, sure there is.
The gaunt face, the brown eyes that seemed perpetually amused, the beer drinker's thatch. I don't know what a beer drinker's thatch is.
It's hair.
Yeah, but what
what
does
a
beer drinking have to do with your hair?
looks like? Is it moustache?
Maybe.
I've got a beer drinker's What?
I think she's describing Nigel Farage now.
Yeah, it does sound like him.
She'd briefly taken to walking into his office and staring at him for no particular reason, but he hadn't seemed to notice and she had soon given up. Just when she was about to abandon the English male as a contradiction in terms, she met Dr. Adam Swallow. In contrast to Roger, with his gelatinous ability to see both sides, Adam was a believer, a man of ideological certainty. The first word she heard him utter was bollocks. That is, he said it once, and then he repeated it, and then he said it again. Oh, God. He was sitting only 2 away from her in the Strangers' Gallery in the House of Commons. In principle, she should have been offended. By the second, and certainly by the third bollocks, she should, in all propriety, have said, "Sst! Oi, do you mind?"
By the second or third bollock, she probably should have been alarmed.
Because there, the object of the apathetic attention of everyone who could be bothered to sit on those bum-polished green benches was her poor Roger. It was a big set-piece Iraq debate on a weaselly opposition motion, and the subject was Britain's continuing commitment. Loads of members on both sides had given vent to little peeps of concern. Cameron thought Roger was making, by his standards, a respectable speech, jabbing his scrunched-up notes and sometimes seeming quite emotional. From time to time, however, he let fall some parliamentary platitude, and this earned her scorn. This is fucking shit.
Yeah, this is total dreck.
Bollocks, said the man to her right with the Aztec profile.
What the fuck is wrong with him?
Some people shifted and snorted at the blasphemy. At the top of the stairs behind them, a man appeared in the doorway. He was dressed in a black tailcoat with a huge gold seal at his belly, and since he was shaven, skulled, and had the physique of Big Daddy, great reference there, a reference that everyone's going to get, Boris.
He knows his audience.
Yeah, fair enough. The Aztec's third interjection was provoked by what Cameron thought was one of Barlow's best passages. Many people on both sides sides of this house, and many people in this country have the profoundest doubts about some of the reasons we were given for going to war. Oh God, this actually goes on and on. This speech. Oh no.
Joe, the quicker you read it, the quicker it's done.
Alright. I have recently been to Baghdad with UNICEF. He paused, looking as self-important as any other MP. And I saw some pretty awful things. The electricity supply is fairly ropey. That's one way of putting it. The sewage system is frankly screwed up. Cameron winced, and there was an unintelligible intervention from one of the few members who was listening. But everywhere I went, I kid you not, I met people who had genuinely cheered and bucked up. No, in some cases, overjoyed, he said, as though suddenly remembering a conversation. And there was a little catch in his throat, and people in the chamber finally stopped gassing and eyeballed him moodily. Yes, in some cases, overjoyed to have been liberated by lubricated by American and British arms from one of the nastiest and most unscrupulous tyrannies of modern memory. Oh God, it's literally still going on. Whatever our intentions, the result was the freedom of a civilised people from a particularly miserable servitude, and of that, I believe, we can be very proud. ISIS? Anyone? We liberated the people of Iraq, did we? That's what happened, is it? Cunt. She was amazed when the assenting groans had died away to hear the Inca... So she was amazed when the assenting groans had died away to hear the Inca prince say bollocks again so loudly that he was heard by someone on the green benches.
Inca Prince.
The Inca prince.
Jesus Christ.
This time Big Daddy in tails descended a few steps towards him. That, however, was 3 months ago. To say that her feelings had changed would do scant justice to the endocrinal choir of happiness within. According to a reductionist account, probably from the pages of Marie Claire, it was all about oh God almighty. Phenylethylamine. It was all about phenylethylamine, which was in turn stimulating the production of norepinephrine and adrenaline. And out of the substantia nigra of her brain came the really good thing, the most powerful and addictive of all drugs in her personal self-generated pharmacopoeia. It was the dopamine, the clinching intoxicant of sexual love, which now propelled her through the concourse of Portcullis House. Without that drug, it is doubtful she would have gone, as she did now, to the pass office.
Oh, God. Chapter 20, 09:16 hours. Blewett was in a considerable taking. The various US listening posts had put together enough snatches of conversation to conclude that something was awry. "I'm coming right over," he told Deputy Assistant Commissioner Purnell. "I want you to explain why the alert status is now Red+. I think we may have an incident involving an ambulance." "An ambulance? Huh?" said Blewett, as if he didn't know. "Like big black birds of prey alighting one after the other on a telegraph wire. The cars of the cavalcade came to a halt in line, exactly abreast of the red carpet that spilled from the steps of St. Stephen's entrance, drew up the decoy Cadillac de Ville, and the crowd experienced a kind of orgasm of hatred."
A hate-gasm.
They sprayed the president with their hatred. "Incoming," said the USSS men, as the eggs volleyed over the road and the railings. And as soon as they splattered on the crimson cloth, the mess was cleared up by men in black tights with J-cloths. Permanent protectees 1 and 2 got out. Almost unseen by the mob, they slipped into the shelter of the marquee and went up the steps, hand in hand, for their first engagement, an audience with the Speaker of the House of Commons. Pressing up against the barricades, a statue of Jan Christian Smuts, the crowd disgraced itself with its commentary. When she entered the pass office, Cameron found she was momentarily tongue-tied. Every yell and honk outside was turning...
Fucking geese.
It's just an army of geese just file in and just devour a lot of them. Oh, if only. Every yell and honk outside was turning into a beat of warning in her lovely head that this was wrong, wrong, wrong.
Is it going to be a musical number?
Yeah. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
Honk, honk, honk.
All the geese for her. Fucking kill her mid-lie like she's still singing. Ah! Everyone knew the risks, and surely Adam could see that there was something weird about what he was asking her to do. Why was she being given no real time to think? Whatever you thought about the president, he was her leader, her head of state. If only in virtue of his office, he deserved her most devoted and assiduous protection. She calmed herself down. Adam could not possibly have got this wrong. It was only a TV crew. Yes, my dear, said the man in the peaked cap, a cheerful father of 3 from Stoggenberger.
She could tell all that just by fucking looking at him.
A cheerful father of 3 from Stoggenber in Somerset. It must be young Jacob Rees-Mogg, who would never forgive himself for what he was about to do. He knew Cameron's face and liked it. What can I do for you? I've come to pick up 4 press passes in the name of Roger Barlow. The man looked confused. In the name of Roger Barlow? In the name of Roger Barlow!
In the name of Roger Barlow.
In the name of Roger Barlow? But he's a member. Yes, no, I mean, they are one-day press passes and Roger Barlow has signed for them. Okie dokie, said the guard, and after rustling in a drawer, he produced 4 laminated badges. Cooer, he said.
No, he fucking didn't.
Well, remember, Joe, he's from Somerset. You know, they all speak like that down there.
Yeah.
I see Mr. Barlow's got some interesting friends. The Al Khadija network, eh? Cameraman, soundman, producer, and reporter. Very good. There you are, my dear. And he handed them over, as a man might hand over 4 freshly microwaved Cornish pasties.
No,
Just literally.
Boris, you don't know what a Cornish pasty is, mate.
A Cornish what?
Oh, I'm sorry. With the Cornish accent, it's pronounced pasty.
Yeah, a Cornish pasty. Cameron took them, and she was about to leave the pass office in search of Adam when she felt faint. She had been up since 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. UK time to catch the early flight back from Brussels. But that wasn't it. She felt suddenly queasy, looking at these 4 photographs which Adam had given her, and which she had cut, which Adam had given her, and which he said had come from Benedict. There was a bench outside the office, and here she sat, with her head forward to promote blood supply. Well, I'll do a book closing.
Okay.
Don't speak over it. Jesus fucking Christ.
Okay, so
Our sort of 1/3 in
summary.
thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously I've known for, quite some time now that Boris Johnson is a repugnant piece of shit. Now, I was expecting this to be repugnant and disgusting.
Yes.
But I was not expecting anything like it actually is. This is
full on. Yeah.
Right, we were saying right at the beginning how filthy the book is.
Yeah.
And that's in every way, and it's so
physically and spiritually
it's
disgusting.
filthy. And he's not just a pervert. He is an elitist and a racist, obviously, to levels that even I, knowing that he's an elitist, I am still absolutely shocked by what I've read in this fucking book.
Yeah, knowing him as well as we obviously do over the years, the rise of Johnson, the brand, to now have him as our Prime Minister, you know what you should expect, but even just from the muted response that this got, obviously it was recently sort of rediscovered when he became Prime Minister. People talked about the fact that, he actually wrote a book not so long ago and this sort of thing. And even then it really didn't get much of a response out of people. Having read this, I just cannot see how that can be the case. It is fucking disgusting. It's everything that you would expect from him, but dialed up. It's such an intimate way of experiencing one person's deranged bigotry. Yeah. And you can't help but feel at some points physically sick whilst reading it.
I think the difference is obviously with Brand Boris, what you get is a very stage-managed version of his bigotry. Whereas this, it's unguarded, and it is a genuine look into Boris Johnson's, or I suppose the way I would put it is that what you get on the television and the newspapers is Boris Johnson. Whereas this, you get a look into the filthy mind of Alexander Boris the Pfeffel Johnson.
Yeah. We're used to seeing Boris, but today
we saw
Al, and
it ain't fucking pretty.
No.
Ask me to tell him something pretty.
So that's it from us this time. Our first foray into the nightmare world of 72 virgins. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like, share the video around. If you really want to help the channel out, that would be the best thing that you could do. If you know anyone that you think would like it, share the video. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below.
Ring the bell.
Yeah, ring the bell.
Woomph, woomph, woomph. Ding-a-ling-ling, woomph, woomph, woomph.
Christ. We know now that that Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson is Boris Johnson's real name. What would your aristocrat name be? If you want you want to let us know, leave it in the comments. So that's it from us for this time. We've still got a little bit left.
Yeah.
To
To drown our fucking sorrows.
to protect us from this
Evil,
filthy filth.
nightmare in a depleted brain. That is just. That's it. Summed right up.
Yeah, well, I think this is. I said it at the beginning. You know, I joked before we started reading this, but I was right in my naivety, in my naivete. I was able to get some insight. This is the literary equivalent of being horny on Maine. It really is. So that's going to do it for this episode of Blind Drunk.
Freddy, fetch the smelling salts.
Okay, so closing lines. Please, if you have the chance, if you're in America and you can help out Bernie Sanders' campaign, please do. We have very limited time to turn things around.
Yes.
And we can do it. It's been done before, and we can do it again.
Vote Labour. I'd say that was pretty non-political. We tried to stay non-political. I think that worked.
We've got to keep it apolitical. We don't want to upset the capital G gamers. So, join us next time for part 2, or possibly part 3, of... I can't keep track of this shit anymore. Join us next time for the next part of Boris Johnson's 72 Virgins, and we'll find out just how deep this Boris hole goes. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. They don't have respect for anything. It's all bullshit. They like money. That's it.
And
money,
boys.
Money, power, boys. The trifecta. The Epstein trifecta.
Oh Christ. Chapter 19. 0914 hours.